Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to the latest in our series of English Muslim College public lectures. As you know, the college of course promote research and teaching, but we also are very keen to act as an interface between the world of cutting-edge scholarship, not just here in Cambridge, but globally, and base communities, people who are in the heart of the Muslim community itself. We feel very often ordinary Muslims don't know enough about what's going on in the world of scholarship, and vice versa. So these encounters are really important. And it's particularly gratifying to us that Dr. Issam should have taken time out of his schedule to be with us today, because one of the questions that we've had most recurrently in the last few months, I guess, in the college is what's happening in Syria, what are the scholars doing in Syria, is there anything we can do to help, what is the outlook, is this the shape of things to come for a wider context in the Arab world. So now's the opportunity not just to listen to me, I've only been to Syria once and I'm not an expert, but to listen to somebody who has been, as it were, is metaphorically at the front line. So I believe we'll speak first and then you'll be willing to answer questions.
Oh, yeah. We'll discuss, yeah.
Okay, well, the floor is yours. Bismillah.
Yeah. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wa afdalu salatu wa atammu taslim, ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yawm ad-din. Amma ba'd. First of all, I want to thank Professor and Sheikh Hakim Murad for this great opportunity that gave me to speak about the role of the Ulama in the Syrian uprising, and also to thank Dr. Atif Imtiaz, who was a friend of mine in maybe 10 years ago in Jordan, and so the time now to refresh this friendship now here in this great and spiritual place. My topic now about the role of the ulama in the Syrian uprising, not to analyze deeply what's going on in Syria, only to give you the general landscape of the religious map in Syria before and throughout and after the Syrian revolution. So we can start with some question: why is the ulama? A question that rebels and opponents have often asked throughout the Syrian crisis. What is the ulama's attitude in current state of affairs uprising? Isn't Islam a religion of justice and dignity? Is it not the duty of the ulama to speak truth to power and stand up against oppression and command right and forbid wrong? In contrast, the regime supporters emphasize that the ulama's duty is to prevent fitna and limit the very real potential for a descent into an endless vortex of violence. The main focus in Islam, they argue, is on the developing the righteous individual. Societal change is only a subsequent step, as the ruler is only a reflection of the moral state of the masses. In this vein, they draw upon a strain in the Islamic tradition which warns against resistance to the ruler, Waliyul Amr, and deems it a huge evil. These questions reflect the religious and political crisis throughout the Arab uprising in general, and Syrian conflict in particular. In reflecting upon the current situation, we need to ask why the ulama have received as much as they have. The standard narrative about the ulama in colonial and post-colonial societies is one of decline and marginalization. But in the Arab Spring, the ulama have consistently been part of the conversation, if not due to their direct intervention, at least in a recognition of their absence. What is that drives a continual interest in the role of the ulama? Is it because of their popularity with the masses, which gives them a position to either resist, control, or restrain? Or is it because they are trusted by the masses? Or is it because they have charismatic character that surpasses other political and social actors in the Arab world? Or is it because the time of Islam has come in order to rule the Arab life? This prominent role played by the ulama and the mosques, the original location of most demonstrations, caused a few intellectuals to be reluctant in supporting these revolutions, which, as they see it, want to bring these societies back, and particularly if we keep in mind the symbol of meeting place, mosque, and the date, Friday. Nevertheless, the majority found convincing justifications for both symbols, as they are the only place and time that people can gather publicly in countries built on a concrete intelligence base which bans all mass gatherings and demonstrations. However, there is a semi-consensus amongst observers that the Arab uprising is in fact a popular and spontaneous revolution that expresses the will of the masses and their intellectual visions, and that the year 2011 is the year of the Islamic wave, coming as a response to the nationalist and leftist wave of the 60s and 70s, which produced these backward and corrupt societies. Thus, Islam and its slogans are raised to be an actor that attracts masses that are seeking an identity in today's world. So this is a map of Syria. So now I can speak about many things related to, because we have 14 cities in Syria. We have the most important cities, Aleppo in the north and Damascus in the south, and we have cities on the border like Hasaka, Zur, and Dara here, Busra. And this most cities on the border. This we have geographic elements. We will I'll speak about that. Anyway, we can back to this map again, and this question that I raised, and now we can start with Syrian ulama before the revolutions. What means that regime used to raise and to maybe to marginalize some groups, and what this means leads to something that, as you see here, the exclusion of Salafis and the Muslim Brotherhood, and then we have new institutions since 1980. According, the Ba'ath regime has strived since 1970 to bring all Islamic communities and discourses under its control through two parallel ways. The first one, a moderate and open way through which the regime attempted to employ the religious discourse in general to serve its political thought. And the second, an aggressive and exclusionary way through the regime sought to eliminate all types of opposition's thought. Because of this, political Islam was absent from the Syrian public sphere. Accordingly, most Islamists were either killed or arrested or fled to other countries. Since the 80s, the Salafis and the Muslim Brotherhood have disappeared in Syria. And from that time, the Salafis and the Muslim Brothers no longer had a noticeable influence on the masses. Additionally, the Syrian people in general have a moderate nature, which avoids and refused armed conflict, the fact which made the marginalization of Salafi and MB achievable thing by the regime. Particularly after the regime had segregated and restricted the resistant elements to a few geographical areas such as Aleppo and Hama. Aleppo in the north and Hama maybe in the middle of Syria, and this in 80s all Islamic or all Islamic groups, Islamists, banned by the regime that time. On the other hand, since 80s, new religious groups and individuals were, which are directly or indirectly associated to the regime, have emerged. While the regime gave a permission and blessing for these new faces in Damascus, in Damascus here. Particularly, it abstract and establishing any institute in other cities except recently in the last years the revolution when some Syrian cities witnessed new religious institutes, especially in Aleppo and Homs. Maybe in Aleppo more than other cities. So now we can go to the most important religious institutes and figures, only to give you the landscape before the revolution. In Damascus, there is a Ministry of Syrian Endowments, Abu Nur Institute, which is related to Sheikh Ahmed Kuftaro, the Institute of Al-Fatah Al-Islami, which is related to the family of Sheikh Saleh Al-Farfur, Sharia Faculty, which belongs to Damascus University, Qubaysiyat Group, other institutes such as the Institute of Al-Tahzib and Al-Ta'lim, and the Institute of Al-Furqan, the group of Sheikh Usama Al-Rifa'i, the community of Zayd bin Thabit, which is specialized in Quran reciting and memorization, and which belongs to Sheikh Abu al-Hasan al-Kurdi, and its charity institute Hifz al-Ni'ma, which is managed by Sheikh Syria al-Rifa'i. Prominent ulama such as Sheikh Naim al-Raqsusi, Muhammad Shuqayr, and Nuruddin Atar, and others who are giving religious and scholarship lessons, which has spread recently in the most important Damascene mosques, and which attracted many students inside and outside of Syria. Sufi groups such as Shaziliya, which belongs to Sheikh Abdul Rahman al-Shaghuri and his followers over the world, in addition to some independent characters such as Sheikh Jawdat Saeed and his community in Dariya and Muaddamiya, and Sheikh Muhammad Habash and his only Syrian center, the Islamic Studies Center. This the religious map in Damascus, as you see. So now in Aleppo there are 3 religious schools to which most religious specialists belong. Al-Khusrawiyya school, an official school from which many prominent ulama graduated. Al-Kiltawiyya, which belongs to Sheikh Al-Nabham, and which currently Sheikh Mahmoud Hout manages. And Al-Sha'baniyya, which belongs to Sheikh Abdullah Siraj al-Din. In addition, 2 sheikhs which were known by their obvious relationship with the regime. Sheikh Suhaib al-Shami, who was extension of his father Muhammad al-Shami, and Sheikh Ahmed Hassoun, the current Syrian Mufti. And the son of the past Sheikh Adib Hassoun, who is the Sheikh of Naqshbandiya group, which many people follow. Independent ulama who most people respect, such as Sheikh Ibrahim al-Salqini, the previous Mufti in Aleppo, passed in the first year of the revolution, who a lot of people consider him as a martyr of the revolution. And finally, a wide spectrum of Sufi groups which are considered the most prominent face of Aleppo, the city of Tasawwuf, as many researchers describe. As for other cities, there are some ulama and groups who attained a reputation that exceeded their cities. But the general feature of all these groups is that they are indebted to or follow one of 2 cities, Damascus or Aleppo. While we find most religious groups in the Syrian north cities, we can go to map here. In the north cities, like here, especially maybe in this countryside, not in Al-Hasaka, in this countryside, from here to here. While we find most religious groups in the Syrian north cities and their countryside mostly followed and are loyal to Aleppo Sheikh, we find the south of Damascus. Here, besides find of the south of Damascus and its countryside, Latakia, here, and Homs, and Deir Zor, and even some areas in the eastern north followed the Damascene groups and sheikhs, like Hasaka and Al-Qamishli. From these cities, some groups and ulama raised, such as the group of Sheikh Al-Khaznawi and Al-Dirshawi in the eastern north of Syria, especially in Hasaka and Al-Qamishli. The group of Sheikh Saeed Al-Kahil, Adnan Al-Saqqa and Sheikh Ismail Mazzoub in the Homs city. Also the prominent presence of some sheikhs and religious scholars in some cities such as Dar'a, Latakia, Deir ez-Zor and Idlib here beside Aleppo. Their fame didn't exceed their geographical location, and accordingly they didn't have in general a remarkable influence in the Syrian religious map. Needless to say that every previous institute and scholar requires a deep and long historical and social study. The goal of my study is not examine all these details, but to show overlaps and links between these institutes and individuals, to clarify the geographical elements, common thoughts and features, popular impact, and the official and semi-official association with the regime, and finally to study change and transition which occurred in the structure of these institutions throughout the Syrian revolution. So we can start with the geographical factor. We notice here few points. Dependence and loyalty of most religious communities in most Syrian cities to ulama and communities of Damascus and Aleppo, except in some cases. The most geographical location has received religious communities, institutes and prominent ulama is Damascus. Most religious communities which are located in border areas, especially here in countryside of Aleppo, in Hasaka and Qamishli and Abu Kamal, beside Deir ez-Zor and Dar'a. In this borders area were affected by neighbor countries in terms of their discourses and thought formation, such as Aleppo city and its countryside. Here we can find the Sufi nature in Aleppo and its countryside, and Al-Hasaka and Qamishli and their traditional Sufi and school nature, especially the schools of Al-Khaznawi and Dirshawi, which related to Turkey school, like Sharh al-Mutun wa al-Nahu wal-Sarf wa al-Kutub al-Qadima al-Safra. And there are cities which has few Salafi discourses and groups. So before the revolution only we can notice Salafi group in Dar'a, and that's affected maybe by Jordan or by Gulf countries. Especially we have some figures in Dar'a like Sheikh Lu'ay Zobi, who fund activists and rebels there before and throughout the revolution. We can go to now. Yeah. To popular influence. We can notice that whenever the religious institute interested in da'wah discourse or traditional fiqh or Sufi, we find that this institute has a wide popular influence. For instance, the Qubaysiyat movement or Sheikh Rifai and Sheikh Kuftar's group. In contrast, we notice that this popularity decreases if the sheikh associated directly to the regime, such as Sheikh Hassoun and Al-Shami in Aleppo. However, Sheikh Al-Buti here considered a peculiar and exceptional case in the religious Syrian map. He is a sheikh who is known by his strong relationship with the regime and in the same time by his wide popularity and credibility. The case that has considerable reasons with which I studied in a separate study, as I told you in the morning. In addition, whenever the focus of the religious institute was on traditional issues such as prayer, piety and avoiding the Syrian public sphere, there were a huge number of followers and a wide blessing from the regime. In contrast, if the concerns of the sheikh or group are related to intellectual issues, public sphere or deep social change, the popularity shrinks and censorship increase and stifle all individuals of these groups. For instance, Sheikh Jawdat Said and his followers in Daraya and Sheikh Mahmoud Akkam in 19th in Aleppo. The intellectual coming between these institutions and individuals. The wide spectrum of these groups and individuals belongs to the Syrian majority Sunni. that can be described as a weak majority in terms of the general absence of sectarian awareness and the lack of identity concept. This majority is often concerned about narrow loyalties that take it far away from the general loyalty to Sunni. Most loyalties of these groups are geographic or to Islamic law schools. Here we see the loyalty to Damascus city for many people is more than to the Sunni identity. The fact that you see Damascene people live and feel harmony and coexist with their Christian neighbor more than with rural people. They have in general liked the way in which Aleppans, Syrian people in Aleppo, deal with Kurdish and rural people. Have a lofty look at each person who is not from Damascus or Aleppo. On the other hand, you find some persons who describe themselves by Shafi'i or Hanafi as a distinction from others. So we can find, especially maybe in Aleppo and Damascus, some people describe themselves as Shafi'i, not Sunni. So for me in Syria, before the revolution, maybe it's rare to hear from one I'm Sunni. Maybe I'm Shafi'i, I'm Hanafi, I'm from this Sufi group, from the group of Sheikh Issam al-Rifai. But we cannot find. It's very rare to find someone to describe himself as Sunni. So actually, the Sunni Syrian society doesn't feel threatened or identity problem inside Syria, except Islamists who insist on the identity issue, warning of a Shiite spread and presenting for that text and evidence that expose their true attitude and vision. But the Syrian majority often is unconcerned about these ideas. Beyond of this identity, we notice overlaps common between these institutions as following. Sufi groups which share in the title but differ in the number of followers. We notice that, for example, between Shaziliya and Naqshbandiya in general, and also inside these groups, such as Shaziliya groups in Aleppo. Groups of religious and traditional lessons. Here we don't find, obviously, the concept of a group. So students of these groups move from one place to another, aiming to benefit from all ulama. Nevertheless, this group, students and ulama, are distinguished by respecting each other, as we see in lessons of Sheikh Al-Qsusi, Shuqayr, Rifai, and Itter in Damascus. School groups that are distinguished by an obvious loyalty and sometimes by exalting the institute's founder, as we see in Kultawiya School in Aleppo and Abu Nur Institute in Damascus. Official groups and institutions such as the Endowments Ministry and its branch in all cities that control the religious discourse in all Syrian mosques. Independent ulama who are often distinguished by their reformist discourse and who meet often in their houses and sometimes in official intellectual centers such as Sheikh Jawdat Saeed and Sheikh Mu'adh al-Khatib. Most of those groups and individuals refuse the Salafi and MBA, Muslim Brotherhood. And often they profess their refusal. In addition, most of them have direct or indirect relation with the regime, so you don't find a sheikh amongst them without some connection to a high or low ranked officer, except for the last group, which was censored by the intelligence Syrian. Maybe that's the most important part of this lecture. Transformations in the structure of the religious groups throughout Syrian revolution. Since the beginning of the Syrian revolution, a blurred landscape has covered the various religious groups. Given the prominence of demonstration outside of mosque after Friday prayers, every person who has a relation with any religious group felt compelled to give his opinion or his sheikh's opinion. Needless to say that any declaration has risky consequences, which may lead to the sheikh's death or arrest. Alternatively, or washing his mind by regime's officers, if he supports the revolution even if implicitly, or losing his followers and accusations of being a spy or intelligencer in favor of the regime if he supports the regime even if implicitly. Hence, the suffering began with the big responsibility which chased ulama in everywhere, in which was increased whenever the sheikh's popularity was high or the risk was happening in his location or area. Accordingly, we can understand in some cases why the focus was on this sheikh more than others, and understand the time context of declaration of every sheikh. The Syrian revolution has two trajectories: geographic and time. The geographic trajectory compelled forced ulama to bear the responsibility for truth clarification in the location in which ulama reside. Accordingly, we understand that the first religious defection that occurred was in Dar'a as Mufti, the first defection from the official institutes. And that the first sheikhs who were exposed to killing, prison, and other risks were Dar'a's sheikh, followed by Homs, whose entirety rebelled and whose most senior and junior sheikhs supported the revolution, and accordingly suffered displacement, prison or evacuation, such as Sheikh Anas Suwaid, Mahmoud, Mamdouh Junaid, Adnan As-Saqqa. So this city didn't witness any sheikh who gained people's trust before the revolution struck their expectations. Moreover, some sheikhs of the city were leading demonstrations and giving speeches in public places, such as Sheikh Junaid in Homs, as a famous place, As-Sa'a, Sa'at Homs. That's a very famous place who Sheikh Mamdouh Junaid gave many speeches and led the demonstrations. Hama is a third city which engaged strongly in the revolution, doesn't have prominent religious leaders because most of its leaders were killed, arrested, or evacuated after the events of the 80s. Since that time, fear has spread in all its sides. The fact that made most of its sheikhs and students follow Damascus and Aleppo's ulama. As for Damascus, the revolutionary activity was divided between the city and its countryside. While the countryside was part of the most active areas of the revolution since its beginning, the city witnessed demonstrations in some mosques, such Al-Hasan and Al-Rifa'i mosque. Therefore, we can understand the great size of the responsibility which ulama of this place undertook. While the countryside of Damascus didn't witness any prominent sheikh who supported the regime, in particular in Daraya, Mu'addamiyya, Douma, and Harasta, this is the countryside of Damascus, Damascus city witnessed vague statements and declarations ascribed to its ulama. Accordingly, we don't find a direct and obvious declaration inviting people to demonstrate against the regime, but most of their statements were addressed to stop oppression, urging on justice and political change and reform. However, the continuity of demonstrations which were occurring at Al-Hasan and Al-Rifa'i mosques exposed their sheikhs directly to harm. While the Minister of Endowments ordered Sheikh Quraym al-Rajih to stay at his house, Sheikh Usama al-Rifa'i was the victim of a direct assault by security forces and Shabiha. Shabiha is not official. Some persons from, especially from Latakia and from the coast of Syria, who engaged in arresting and killing, torture people. You know this very famous word now on the channels and TV. And then he missed Sheikh Usama al-Rifa'i. He missed till he departed the country. And then he started to support directly and obviously the revolution. The same scenario happened with the Sheikh was Shaykh al-Rajih, who afterward joined al-Rifa'i and other ulama who founded a new ulama association, about which I'll speak later. As Aleppo joined the revolution late, most of its ulama remained far from the direct questioning and responsibility. However, most of its prominent ulama signed statements which urged all to stop killing and oppression and relieve affected people, especially in Homs. Even though these ulama were exposed to questioning, but not like other cities, as the regime intended to show Aleppo as its spoiled son. On the other hand, I mean by the time trajectory, the deep transition that the Syrian revolution has faced, generally beginning with peaceful protests, passing by defections from the regime army, and establishing the free army to the proclamation of al-jihad, and ending with the emergent civil and military Salafi groups. The general features of the religious groups in the first 6 months of the revolution is that they were moderate, didn't prefer change by force, and they issued vague statements. But this situation changed when the regime used intensely in Ramadan its heavy equipment military in Hama. Then the revolution trajectory started to turn quickly to be an armed revolution, in particular after the first military defection of Hussein al-Harmoush, which was followed by many official persons such as the Mufti of Dara. And afterward, the striking recording which showed the announcement of young females defecting from the Qubaysiyat group. In the details of this trajectory, we find that the structure of the religious group started to destruct and demolish, either by followers defecting, losing their popularity, moving and adopting a new vision, claiming that they believe in the change before the revolution, or by escape of their leaderships like Shaykh Issam al-Rifa'i, Shaykh Ibrahim Rajih, and most prominent ulama in Aleppo and Damascus went out from Syria, and so their groups demolished, and then there was no any lesson in Damascene mosque and Aleppo mosque. Also, it was noticed that whenever they focused on the sectarian dimension, showing the religious and jihadi slogan and armed aspect raised, the change and modification of the structure of these groups was very deep, and maybe their demise and emerging new groups with new discourses and concepts reflects the time and place context. So, this is the last part of my paper, how we can classify of the old and the new religious groups. So we have here 6 groups after the revolution, throughout and after the revolution. The first groups that support the revolution explicitly. Most religious groups and leaders in the Syrian countryside in most cities announced clearly their support the revolution. The fact that some observers attributed to a rural reaction against cities and against the official religious and political discourse, which worked through many years on marginalizing the countryside. But this analysis couldn't be applied to some groups that worked throughout the years that preceded the revolution on developing a religious discourse concerned about the reforming human rights and values of citizenship and dignity, such as Sheikh Jawdat Sa'id and Mu'adh al-Khatib's group. In addition, we find that most religious groups and leaders in the city of Dar'a, Homs and Hama and most Syrian cities of the northeast clearly announced their support the revolution. A fact that some observers attributed to a reaction against the long dependence and loyalty to Damascus and Aleppo groups, which announced their position by vague statements. There are also some ulama who declare their opinion in support of the revolution, such as Sheikh Issam al-Ba'darani, the religious consultant of the previous president Hafiz al-Assad, who suffered an exclusion of the regime and religious institutions throughout Bashar al-Assad rule. The fact some attributed to a reaction against the previous exclusion that Sheikh faced. So the second group that support the regime explicitly. Actually, we couldn't point out, obviously, that there is a religious group which adopted the regime's vision, except for the Ministry of Endowments and its branch in cities, and some institutions which are associated to the ministry, such as Abu Nur Kuftaro Institute. The Ministry of Endowment strived throughout the revolution to found new groups and associations under different titles, such as the Union of Sham Ulama, Rabitat Ulama al-Sham, from the first year of the revolution, claiming that ulama really support the regime. These new associations often include some Friday preachers and directors of official institutes like the directors of Abu Nur and Al-Fatah Institute and some muftis. But the most prominent figures of this association are Al-Buti and Al-Mufti Hassoun. While the Hassoun's attitude was not surprising, Al-Buti's statements, speeches, lessons, fatwas were striking news, which caused many discussion and debates that occupied website, which caused him to lose most his followers, as we see in a video on the internet showing only 20 to 40 students attending his lesson compared to the huge number of students that attended his lessons before the revolution. The third groups that support the regime implicitly. The group whose attitude is vague are the Sufi groups and the Qubaysiyat. While some activists show support for these groups, the revolution, others provide recording that proves their support the regime, as we can see in the Qubaysiyat case, which the regime strive to show them as supporters through some pictures which show their meeting with the president. The fact that many justify that the meeting as happening by force. As for Sufi group, the ambiguity of their attitude was also justified, as these groups are concerned mainly about a spiritual and individual, not the public sphere. The fact that opened many questions about the role of these groups. This ambiguity was the general feature of most Sufi groups in Aleppo, such as Al-Kiltawiya, whose some followers leaked a recording which shows support of its Sheikh Mahmoud Houd for the regime and his accusing the rebels. But afterward, other followers leaked a recording which shows him criticizing the regime. But we cannot generalize this vague image on all Sufi groups, as there are counter-examples, such as Sheikh Abu al-Huda al-Yaqubi in Damascus and Sheikh Mahmoud Abu al-Huda al-Husayni in Aleppo, whose support for the revolution was explicit and early, the fact that some attributed to the high education that both of them have. The first groups that support the revolution implicitly, such as most of Damascus ulama and Aleppo and some Aleppo ulama in the first year of the revolution. This ambiguity started to change when the revolution arrived at Aleppo and Damascus. And we can see this ambiguity in Sharia faculty, where most of its lecturers supported the revolution by blurred words, since they were suffering double worries: the fear of the Syrian intelligence and the double censorship by intelligence institutes and their colleagues. The fifth group, new groups outside Syria. In the first year of the revolution, some associations were established by Syrian ulama, most of whom lived outside Syria before the revolution, such as the Syrian Ulama Association, Rabitat al-Ulama al-Suriyin, whose head is Sheikh Ali al-Sabuni, and whose vision is traditional and moderate. This association issued many statements which are considered the first religious statements against the regime. Also, such as the Syrian Islamic Forum, Al-Multaqa al-Islami al-Suri, which was established in Istanbul by a lot of external ulama except few members like Sheikh Anas Suwaid from Homs. Although this institute relies on Sharia as a source of law, it sees the citizenship as a right for all Syrians, and it describes itself as a moderate, open, developing the Islamic openness and deep discourse. Also, such as the Islamic organization of Sham, Hay'at al-Shami al-Islamiyya, which was also established in Istanbul at the end of 2011 by unknown ulama for most Syrian, and which presented itself as a reformist Islamic institute that considers citizenship a right for all Syrians. However, the most important institute founded throughout the revolution is the Ulama al-Sham Association, Rabitat Ulama al-Sham. It's like reaction for the first Rabita which the Syrian endowment, the Ministry of Endowments found. But Rabitat Ulama al-Sham founded in Syria in 1950s, in the middle of 20th century. This association was founded very late, in September 2012, in Doha by several ulama that fled from Syria, such as Sheikh Quraym al-Rajih, the association head, Sheikh Usama al-Rifai, the deputy, Sari al-Rifai, Ratib al-Nabulsi, Mamduh Junaid, Adnan al-Saqqa, and Abdul Karim Bakkar, who are aiming to support the revolution through Jihad al-Kalima, to form a religious referentiality which controls rebels' behaviors according to Sharia, works on a moderate discourse which dismisses sectarianism and treats all Syrians as equal. The last group, new growing groups inside Syria. Most of these groups were founded in an exceptional, brutal, and violent circumstances, and emerged generally as a reaction to the brutality of the regime, or as relief and judgment groups in the areas that became out of the regime control. These groups can be classified in three types: ulama, judges, and armed groups. However, these groups generally have two features: they are young and they are rural. As armed groups emerge as a reaction to the brutal acts, they generally have an extremist attitude and often adopt a Salafi vision, describing the regime in sectarian terms such as Nusayri, Rafidi, Alawi, Kafir, etc. As for other groups, they are almost students of Syrian universities, in particular Sharia, the fact which made them trusted persons, as we see in Aleppo and Damascus countryside, such as the Association of Ulama Revolution in Jabal al-Zawiya, Tajammu' Ulama Jabal al-Zawiya, Tajammu' Ulama Jabal al-Zawiya, in the west of Aleppo and beside Idlib city, and the local judgment council in the countryside of Aleppo that spread a lot in Aleppo, the judgment council and the Mahakim al-Shar'iyya, especially in the countryside of Aleppo, and most judges in these areas from Sharia faculty students, especially in the Ma'arat al-Nu'man, the Azzi, and the areas that beside Turkey borders. According to the information previously mentioned, we can conclude these points. Most official religious institutes remain supporting the regime. in particular the Ministry of Endowments and its institutes such Al-Fatah and Abu Nur and the Syrian Mufti. Most traditional institutes, in particular mosques, lessons gave up their activities as most ulama fled to neighboring countries. New groups emerged inside Syria, most of whose ideas are based on criticizing the official and traditional discourses, in which most of these growing groups believes that these discourses were one of the most important reasons for the continuity of Ba'ath regime. However, the traditional ulama still enjoy popular support among Syrian people, especially in Damascus, where conservative and moderate Damascenes rely on the opinions of these ulama. The general religious image inside Syria is that there are currently two views which are the most present. The view that Sheikh al-Bouti supports strongly the regime, and the view that many religious groups believe that the battles are a religious and sectarian conflict. The fact that made many wise ulama and groups outside Syria strive to focus on the dimension of the citizenship and non-sectarian revolution. However, with the continuous brutality of the regime, the lack of any convincing political solution, and the vague rule of the international society, Syria goes towards a sectarian conflict and becomes a suitable environment for all sorts of extremists. Thanks for your listening.